Radio check, anybody copy? Hi, everyone. I'm Alice Kaniklen, and this is part 2 of episode 13, Alaska Native Men's Health and Wellness on Coffee and Clock. Coffee and Clock is a podcast I created to celebrate and explore contemporary Native life in urban Alaska. This episode features Tyler Young, also known by his rap stage name, 2 Essentials. Tyler dedicates his personal and professional time to supporting others towards their wellness goals. He says that identifying a healthy support system, healing from past traumas, and helping his fellow community members are what contributes to his own personal wellness. He's a talented musician, and throughout this episode, you'll hear his song titled Work, which I've had stuck in my head the last week. I first met Tyler through a mutual friend. He and his fiancée were babysitting my best friend's kids while she was out on her honeymoon. How sweet is that? Anyway, for this interview, COVID had just hit the U.S., so we had our discussion over Skype, social distancing. No clock this time, but plenty of clock for thought. We discussed toxic masculinity, colonization, and Tyler even shared a little bit about his own struggles with trauma and abuse. Oftentimes, remote interviews can feel cold and impersonal. I think we're all experiencing a little Zoom meeting fatigue. But let me tell you, Tyler really spoke from the heart for this one, and I can't thank him enough.
I truly believe that the only thing that we own in this life is the choice we have in front of us right now. And you can either go an unhealthy path or, you can put your best foot forward.
Coffee or clock?
Coffee.
Apple or Android?
Android.
Kool-Aid or Tang?
Kool-Aid.
Yes. Caribou or salmon?
Salmon.
Snow machining or four-wheeling?
Four-wheeling.
Blueberries or salmon berries?
Salmon berries.
All right. Okay. Now we know. For our listeners, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Good evening, everyone, or hello, good morning, whenever you're listening to this. My name is Tyler Young. My native name is Apakutuk, which is actually a Yupik name. I'm not Yupik, but I was given a Yupik name because I never got a Sukhstun or Simshan name. So I'm really honored to have that name. And I was born in Anchorage, Alaska. I call this my hometown, but I grew up in Washington State and northern Colorado before I moved back to Anchorage in 2007. When I was living in Washington, I grew up on the reservation and stuff like that, 2 different reservations. So I've got a lot of exposure to lower 48 Indians, and I identify with them too. I'm also part lower 48 Indian,
Wow,
Lakota and Cherokee, yeah. I work for a nonprofit healthcare organization here in Anchorage, and I work a lot with our community, both native and non-native, and basically facilitate kind of like talking circles. It's open to anyone 18 and older, and I get to facilitate those, make sure they stay on track, and also be a participant, not just a facilitator, so it's pretty neat. I get to be a part of people's healing journey in that way. I just help out where I can. I'm in recovery myself. I just celebrated 4 years of sobriety on March 1st. And
Wow.
So I like working with other men. I've worked with a lot of Native men and kind of like to be a part of people's recovery, and be of service that way to my community, on my own journey of wellness. Now that I have like kind of a grasp on it, I mean, every day takes work on this journey, but now that I have a better footing on it, I feel like it's my responsibility to give back and help the next person. So
Essentials. Dr. Hayden.
Appreciate you, man.
I feel like we're all on a wellness journey. You know what I mean? And some people think that it's like some kind of destination or like you'll get there like, oh, now I'm at, like it's from here to there. But it really is like something that you have to work at, every day. I've just become more mindful about that now that we're doing the whole, pandemic lockdown quarantine thing, that you really need to work at taking care of yourself and making sure that you're healthy, mentally and physically. Like it takes work every day.
It does. And that's a really like important insight too, that I like to share with people. It does take work. It takes upkeep. It takes maintenance, and that's every day. It's making that choice to be healthy. And yeah, all this stuff that's going on, it's it's crazy too. And it's important to maintain your health,
How are you doing during this quarantine lockdown time?
Ooh, to keep it real, it's been hard. It's been tough. I'm fortunate enough to I have a job to where I can work remotely and work at home, which is a big adjustment in itself, going all virtual and doing everything online and trying to figure out, how we could provide services for the work that I do online. It's been a challenge. It's been kind of exhausting. I've been trying to really stay grounded in all of it, and trying to practice that maintenance of wellness and, doing different things that I've learned to kind of, stay afloat during all this. But it's been difficult for sure, as I know it's been for a lot of people too.
Such a big change.
Yeah. And you know what? The cool thing is, like, I've seen a lot of generosity and compassion, in the community, with people trying to really support each other and hold one another up in this time, this hard time. And that's what it's all about. So, I mean, there's been some positive stuff I've seen already.
I'm looking at the bright side, counting on my blessings, living and I'm learning, pay attention to the lessons, take what I like and leave out what don't fit.
I'm so thankful for you to be willing to participate in Coffee and Quack. I have heard a little bit about you from, mutual friends. And so I was like, oh my gosh, she would be a really great person to talk to for this episode. So this episode has been kind of brewing in my mind ever since I started Coffee and Quack. I think it's an important topic that we don't necessarily talk about enough, especially in public places. It's important. It affects us all, and so I hope that maybe by sharing your story or talking about some aspects of this topic, that it will resonate with some listeners, or it'll make listeners think about things in a new way. Maybe just even provide some understanding, because I think that's the first thing that needs to happen to express compassion and see someone as a person rather than a statistic.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and seeing the humanness in people, and, also acknowledging that there might be some real trauma or hurts that are underneath that behavior, that are causing people to act certain ways. We're all humans, and no one's perfect, and it's important to realize that.
Learning how to listen clearly as the year is 2020 with my vision, giving a gift, and that's empathy. But I won't waste my
Okay, so my first question is, what do you think the biggest issues that our Alaska Native men face today?
I just want to kind of preface this by saying I'm not an expert by any means, but I have a lot of experience in working with men, and particularly Alaska Native men. I just kind of draw from that experience and working with them, and myself as an Alaska Native man, and I think there's kind of different answers on this, and it can be kind of complex at times, As far as issues today, there's a lot of substance abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction, which contributes to a lot of domestic violence, sex assaults, which contributes to incarceration. My understanding is that Alaska Natives make up roughly 18% of the total population in Alaska. 35 to 40% of the prison population in Alaska is Alaska Natives, which is crazy. substance abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction, which leads to lots of crime, domestic violence, assaults, things like that, and then incarceration and recidivism rates too. I know for me personally, it has a lot, identity. I think as Alaska Native people, I'm speaking for myself too, it's like, I identify as an Alaska Native man, right? I'm proud of that, and I know I come from strong people and all that, but I have to live in a modern world, a colonized world, a white man's world, so to speak, and trying to find balance in that. It's hard. It's a hard thing to navigate.
I believe in karma. Get what you put out. Some people tripping like they on one, drifting out their lane, moving out their bubble, getting in my business.
How do you think we got here?
I really believe a lot of this has to do with, starting with colonization, honestly. And I know that's a word that gets tossed around a lot, but I think it gets tossed around a lot because it's something that needs to be talked about. Going all the way back to like Russian contact in the 18th century with Alaska Native people. They tried to colonize certain areas and, brought a lot of disease with them. I'm in a college class right now and I'm doing a research paper on kind of linking historical trauma and substance abuse in the Alaska Native population. And Kodiak Island, between 1820 and 1840, 80% of their population was wiped out because of, diseases that they didn't have immunities to, and that happened all over in Alaska, so you got being colonized, these foreign people bringing diseases, but then also trying to bring their culture and their ways and imposing it on Alaska Natives. Boarding schools, you hear a lot of stories about that.
Part of that too is the enslavement. I did the interview process for a film documentary that we did speaking to the enslavement of indigenous peoples in the entire U.S. So a lot of people understand that our populations were mostly decimated by disease alone, but also part of that was the forced slavery, and I think it's called indentured slavery, where they would take control of you and then make you work for them, and but you can never earn enough money to get out. What was really interesting for me is when I was looking up statistics for our Native groups and what some of whose suicide rate and all of those things are the highest. And I thought it was going to be the Alutiiq from Kodiak because of the enslavement. And because I had just recently learned about that. And so I was like, whoa, that's got to be like a hard reckoning with your past, to think about those things. But it's not. They actually have one of the lowest rates. Inupiaq men have the highest rate, which was really surprising. It's kind of not because, I'm from the North Slope and I know, that's a part of our reality, which is horrible. But it was just a little bit shocking to me.
Yeah, no, it is hard. It's a really hard thing to look at. And there's so much suicide and things like that, and that's another big issue too, and we have immense like high rates of suicide, indigenous peoples from all, in the United States too, but particularly Alaska too. And going back to the question on how we got here, it's that there's a lot of kind of in the work that I do, I've seen this. I acknowledge that. And I totally believe that historical trauma that happened to us, that disease, that death, and all that stuff, loss of culture, identity, that carries on to us today. And I've been looking at a lot of stuff like intergenerational trauma. There's like physical, I don't know if you've heard of epigenetics and things like that. That stuff is like genetically passed down physically. I think that's part of it. And I kind of believe in that too, but also in spirit. Native people carrying that still, and just I know for me personally, and in my own journey, of healing, or I realized that I carried a lot around that stuff a lot, inside. And for years, I tried to drink to numb it, and do drugs and all that. but I was carrying a real wound, and this has been passed down from my dad, my mom, their parents, and so on, who